Hi, and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of Kevin MD. Today on the show, we have Reem Al Shabeeb. She is a medical student and she wrote the Kevin MD article, The Role of Residents in Teaching and Creating a Positive Clinical Learning Environment. Reem, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be here.
We'll get into your article in a little bit, but first off, can you share your story and your journey to where you are today?
Sure. So my name is Reem Al Shabeeb. I'm a fourth-year medical student at the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. I'm calling from my family's apartment in Silver Spring, Maryland. That's about 45 minutes to GW, where I went there for college and now medical school. In college, I had a really great experience. I really loved it. I double majored in biology and chemistry. And then I also got involved in a lot of teaching and research activities that I continue now in medical school. Now I'm a fourth-year medical student applying to internal medicine residencies, and it's really exciting and it's a really fun time, Kevin, because in less than 2 months, I'll find out where I match and I'll get to graduate then soon after and become a doctor and become a resident. So I'm really excited about all of that.
Well, congratulations on being towards the end of your medical school journey. Now, we are speaking at the end of January. So tell me about the whole residency interview process during the pandemic.
Sure. So the residency interview process during the pandemic was all virtual for me, and it's really interesting because at the beginning we were a bit worried. It was like, are we going to be able to really assess programs? But then I think that the programs I interviewed at and did a great job at really like showing a lot of opportunities for the students to learn about the program. So that was really nice. Like we had breakout sessions about interviewing, and we had like breakout sessions with the residents. And then it was really nice. They kind of tried to simulate the true experience of interviewing. They had even virtual tours. So that was really exciting and really fun.
What's something that you have to do differently while interviewing virtually versus interviewing face to face with someone?
I feel like one of the things that I learned is to get a better camera and a better microphone. And so a lot of my classmates did that. And then we also learned tips about lighting. So for example, right now there's a window in front of me because that gives you the best lighting. And then we learned that we need a really good and strong internet connections. So it's just these things that make the interview more natural. But other than that, I felt like with virtual interviewing, it's like the one-on-one interviews that I had when I applied to medical school. I didn't see a lot of difference, which was really nice.
So you talk about a microphone, better camera, better lighting. Coincidentally, that's all the things you need to start a video podcast as well. So perhaps
Yeah,
in the near future, after you finish your residency training, you have everything you need to start a podcast as well.
of course. Thanks, Kevin. And when I had this amazing opportunity to be with you, I was like, okay, well, I'm ready. I have my camera ready. I have my microphone ready. I'm ready to be on the podcast.
So let's transition now into your Kevin MD article, The Role of Residents in Teaching and Creating a Positive Clinical Learning Environment. Now, for those who didn't read that article, can you just walk my audience through it and share the story of why you decided to write it?
And so the story I wrote, or the article I wrote, is about the role of residents in teaching and creating a positive learning environment. So I start the article by saying how nervous I was at the first day of my internal medicine rotation. That was my first clerkship in third year. And then how I was surprised that actually most of my time was actually spent with the residents and how they contributed to my wellness and my happiness through the creation of a positive learning environment. In the article, I mentioned many examples of ways and things that I learned from the residents, not just only in terms of medical education, but things like career advice and professional development. So I emphasize the role of residents in teaching and the creation of a positive learning environment. And those are the residents that I want to be in a few months when I graduate and become a resident myself. And then in terms of why I wrote it, just in general, I love reflective writing and I love journaling. Journaling and reflective writing are my hobbies. And the themes mentioned in this article, like gratitude, positivity, mentorship, teaching, these are things that I'm really passionate about and I really love, and I love reading about, and I love learning about. And so, as one example, in my room right now, I have boxes of thank you cards that I give to people to express my gratitude. And as another example, I had the privilege and the pleasure to help many pre-medical students and junior medical students throughout mentoring. So I just wanted to put more content out there related to these concepts.
So can you tell us a story of how an intern or resident helped you as you were going through these medical school clinical rotations?
Sure. So I mentioned many in the article. For example, I had a resident who would go over CT scans with me to make sure that I'm not only just reading the impressions, but kind of like turning on like opening the CT scan on the chart and then asking me, okay, well, can you tell why the impression said that? Or just making sure that I understand what's going on with the test that we're ordering with the patients. In thinking about what qualities I want to have as a medical resident that I'm graduating really soon, the two things that come to my mind is the first is just being proactive in helping others, because especially early on in the clinical year, we may not know as students what we don't know, or we may not know what we need help with, or we may not know what capacity the resident can help the student, or we may just be shy to ask the resident for help. So just being proactive in asking the medical students, like, am I ready presenting this to the attending? Or do I want to practice presenting to the resident before the attending? And things like that that my residents did that I felt were really helpful. Or just when they had a free time and when there was a free time on their rotation, when we were able to just talk and like learn and go over practice questions, that was very helpful. And then the other thing that I really appreciated in my residents is that how amazing they were in being transparent and just remembering what it was like to be a medical student. And they would say things like, oh, when I was a medical student, I was also nervous on the first day. And so things like that would lighten up the mood and just strengthen teamwork and strengthen our bond as one team. So, in one of the studies that I mentioned in the article is how, from the student's perspective, it's not really the resident's medical knowledge that the students cares about the most, but it's rather the resident's ability to create a safe clinical learning environment. And that makes sense to me because the things that medical students usually need help with are things like just practicing presentations and finding information on the chart. So these are the things that residents can easily do and can contribute to the creation of a more positive and safe learning environment.
Now, like a lot of medical students, I'm sure that your experiences with interns and residents have not been universally positive. What are some of the things that residents and intern did that kind of struck you as particularly negative or unhelpful during your clinical rotations?
I would say that most of my experiences were positive. On the off chance, like once in a blue moon, that there would be an experience that is not good. And it would be just going back on the opposite of the points that I mentioned, not being proactive in helping the medical students, or not remembering what it was like to be a medical student. And so things like that, I found that sometimes my classmates and I were a bit unhappy about, and we wished more work from the residents' part would be done to make it more teamwork based. So, for example, like not asking us if we understand what's going on the rotation, or when we're not sure what's going on a certain rotation. And it's not really like a negative on the aspect of the person, because every person who goes through medical school and matches like now I'm in an interview season, and the process is not easy to apply and be selected as a resident. So the fact that they are there already, that means they are an amazing person with great clinical skills and great interpersonal skills. And so these the negative aspects that are rare, they're usually not intentionally, but like there are ways that can if the resident is more proactive in helping the student, it would just make it better.
Now, is there any way for medical students to offer constructive criticism to help improve clinical teaching aspects that the residents have?
So I was actually just in doing residency interviews, and at most programs they have already programs or lectures on how to give feedback, how to be more effective teacher, and things along that line. And then for the medical student, I think it's if everyone is transparent and just taking it from the perspective that you're an amazing person and this is just to help you like become more amazing, then it will be all on the same team. So I think like with transparency, it would all be a good or a better environment. So, and I would, there was not at a single point where like I asked like a resident, like, hi, can like you walk me over like this patient's chart, or like I cannot understand the CT scan. Just from my experience, no resident really said no. So it's just like being more transparent in asking for help that would get you the help you want.
Was there any difference across specialties during your clinical rotation, medicine versus surgery versus OB versus psychiatry versus pediatrics?
I felt that across the board, I had amazing residents. I had amazing residents in internal medicine, like I mentioned in the article. And then I had amazing resident in pediatrics. And then even in specialties that you would hear or read in the literature, like they have a high mistreatment rates, like in surgery. There I still had some of the most amazing residents and I formed friendship with so many of them. And so across the board, I felt that people were able to be themselves and be helpful to me and be great to me. And just when I was reflecting back on the article I wrote, so this article I wrote right after I finished my first rotation of internal medicine, but there were still so many amazing examples that happened in every single rotation, and so many amazing residents that I met. So I felt that in the end of the day, anyone can really be a great resident and contribute to the creation of a safe and a positive learning environment.
We're talking to Reem Al Shabeeb. She is a medical student and she wrote the Kevin MD article, The Role of Residents in Teaching and Creating a Positive Clinical Learning Environment. Reem, you're now towards the end of your fourth year. Is there anything that you know now that you wish you knew back before you started your clinical rotations?
When I get this question, the main thing I say, like, or the main advice I give to more junior medical students is first and foremost is like to work hard and be strong advocate to patients. After all, that's why we're in medical school. And so that's always like the first tip. And then afterwards, just emphasizing teamwork, not just with the other students or the residents or the attendings, but also with the rest of the nurses and the pharmacists and the medical assistants and the pre-medical volunteers. Together, we improve patient care as a team. And together, it's honestly more fun. It's more fun to like walk around the hospital and hear hi Reem around every corner. And in terms of evaluations, I would ask the attendings I had or my supervisor at the beginning of the rotation about their expectations, and then ask for feedback along the way to make sure that I'm progressing on the right path. And then, also one more thing is that if you know a peer who like did this rotation, I would just ask them about any tips they have or any advice or any feedback that they received that now I can incorporate. For example, midway through my clinical rotations, I started creating these notes about my experiences on the rotations and the feedback that I received. And I would give these notes to classmates who are on rotations. And what I noticed is that most of the time, these notes were really helpful, and I really got a great feedback from my classmates saying, "Oh, this really helped us with this and that." So this is like what I wish I knew like earlier on, or like what I would emphasize in my training.
And my final question, what's your take-home message that you want to leave with the Kevin MD audience?
Sure. My take home message is that in many rotations, students spend most of the time with the residents. and it's important. The residents have an important role in teaching and creating a positive learning environment. So thank you to all the wonderful residents that I had throughout my medical school journey, and thank you, Kevin, for having me.
Reem, best wishes on your residency journey that's upcoming, and thanks again for being on the show.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.